Hey everybody, Steve Macmillan from the Edmonton Woodturners Guild. Here in Stu's shop with Bert, the camera expert at my side. I'm going to demonstrate today the flood coating of the inside of a bowl. And it may turn out to be not necessarily a flood coat. Sometimes what happens with the density of the wood and the inclusions in it, what we end up having to do is do what's called a seal coat, and then that cures or partially cures, and then you do another one that's called the flood coat, and that gives you the smoother finish. I have done some where I can get away with one coat, which basically is a seal coat and a flood coat together. Other times I've had to do two coats, so it all depends on the porosity of the wood and the inclusions you have in it. I've gone and filled some of the larger inclusions in here with CA glue, and that, once you get the epoxy over top, it totally blends in with the CA, so it doesn't even, you can't even tell there was CA in it. Another nice thing about the flood coats in these bowls is any scratches you have in your epoxy come out. They don't show up once you put another coat of epoxy over top. So when you're sanding a hybrid bowl like this, you're basically trying to get the sand marks out of your wood, which is much easier than getting them out of the epoxy anyways. And then depending, there was a few chips out of the epoxy here, and if you can feel the divot in the epoxy, then that's great. If you can see almost like a little chip, but it's smooth on top, then what I do is I take a Dremel and I take the top of it off, because that means it's chipped but not come out, and the epoxy won't necessarily get in underneath the chip. So I take the top of it off and have a divot, and then once the epoxy goes on, goes over smooth. Even though these are white right now, you can't, once the epoxy goes on, you can't even tell they were there. So I think that's it for the intro. This is a salad bowl. It's almost 12 inches wide by, what's that, about 4.5 inches tall. We've left the chuck on the back. What's going to happen is we're going to flood the inside once, maybe twice, and then I'm going to flood the outside like this, and it'll run down here, so we still have the ability to clean up the bottom. And on the ashtrays I've done in the past, you can't really flood the whole thing because you're going to have drips, so you're better to leave your bottom, and what I do is I finish the bottom with Osmo, and really you have to have one surface that doesn't have epoxy on it. At least for me, I don't know how to do it the whole thing without having drips come back onto your finished surface when you do the bottom. So okay, let's go mix the epoxy, and then we'll see if this works. Thanks everybody.
Want me to mount that, Steve?
Is that good?
You want me to mount the bowl on that?
Yeah, carry on.
Oh,
Joe, do whatever.
I'm still on?
Right. You want me to mount this one here?
Yeah.
So what's the mix you're using on there, Steve?
So this is UV epoxy. This is a 1-to-1 mix. So 1 part epoxy, 1 part resin to 1 part hardener. UV epoxy, this is, their spec says you can pour it up to 1/4 of an inch thick per application. And the recoat time on this is great because if it hardens up in 4 hours, then you can recoat already. So anywhere between 4 and 16 hours you can recoat on this. so you can get multiple coats on. I poured this up to 1/2 inch thick in charcuterie boards before, so their tolerance is always less than I think what you're able to do in a real world application. And typically 1-to-1 mixes you mix by hand. I don't use a paddle or a drill with a paddle on it, because you get too much air in the mixture, and I now use a vacuum chamber to degas my epoxy. But 1-to-1 mixes are very, very hard to degas. They don't want to, they're just so thick, the vacuum doesn't want to pull all the bubbles, all the air bubbles out of the mixture. So I mix with these are tongue depressors I get from dollar store, and these are dollar store cups. And you don't need a lot of, you are supposed to scrape the sides as you go along as well, because the resin typically can adhere to the sides, and if your hardener is all in the middle and you're not scraping the sides, then you may get some product that didn't mix properly. And 2 or 3 minutes of mixing here. The working time on this, depending on the temperature of the room, is typically between 20 minutes and half an hour. So, it starts to gel fairly quick, which is great for this application, because you want it to run, but you don't want it to all run off and all run into the bottom of the bowl. And Stu, were you getting me that paintbrush? If anybody's interested, I may start selling these epoxy jeans. They're fairly costly because the epoxy is really expensive, and there's a lot of epoxy on these pants.
They stand up by themselves.
They do. If I could get it way down at the bottom of the leg, they'd actually honestly stand up on their own. Perfect. So we are getting bubbles in the epoxy. I don't know if there's a camera that we can see. There are bubbles in there, but this is going on as a thin coat. So when I hit it with the torch, all the bubbles are going to come out. Basically, they're just surface bubbles. When you're pouring, like I used to pour this before I had my epoxy I use on my charcuterie boards. I used to pour 2 layers of this to get the inch that I needed for my charcuterie boards, and you really have to keep popping the bubbles to make sure you don't get that top layer of bubbles when everything starts to gel past the point of letting the bubbles out. I hope you're going to edit some of this down, Bert, because someone watching me mix for 3 or 4 minutes is...
But that's why it's nice for you to have some commentary, because
Yeah.
you're explaining what's happening so people can realize that it does take that long, right?
So I mix this for roughly 3 or 4 minutes. This stuff, UV epoxy says 1 to 2 minutes, but I constantly scrape the sides. I actually turn it so that epoxy comes up all the way up the side of the thing, and then I turn it so I'm getting any of the resin that could possibly be on the side of the cup. They do tell you that once you're halfway through mixing, take your mixture and pour it into a new cup, and that alleviates any of the resin on the sides that didn't get mixed with the hardener. But I don't do that. I just mix the hell out of it, and I haven't had any issues. So I hope this is enough. I don't think
Is that enough angle on the bowl?
I don't think this is enough, but it doesn't look like enough. Yeah. Okay.
What are we gonna do?
My trusty helper Stu. So what we have to do is, when I pour this in, we're going to start on the rim, and it's gonna slide down. But what we do have to do is kind of paint it onto all the surfaces, because you know there's surface tension between the epoxy and the wood, and even if it looks like the wood has been wet from the epoxy, the tension is sometimes still there, and it wants to flow around parts of the wood. So you get a nice smooth coat, and then you'll have a little piece of wood that seems to have, it didn't slide on that piece of wood the same as everything else. So I either use my hand, I do this on some stuff, or I'm using a paintbrush this time to paint it on. I think I'm actually going to use my hand, because I think I'm going to lose too much of this into the brush, and I don't know whether I mixed quite enough, so I don't want to be short on this.
So it's ready to turn.
Okay, so what we're going to do is
You want me to pour and you turn, or
you know
my
what?
turn?
I got. The only thing with gloves is, with epoxy, you have to keep checking your gloves, because I have epoxy all over my hands, and then I was going to go and
Get fresh gloves.
touch the outside of the bowl. So,
Get fresh gloves.
no, that's fine. All I got to do is,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, you just have to make sure. Oh, that's better. I can turn it off the chuck. So.
Yeah.
Okay, Stu. So you want to just start to pour right in the. Yeah.
Is that
Now
enough?
go slower. Oh shoot, we're locked up. We gotta go this way.
Okay, you're going around.
Okay, you're all the way around. Okay, so stop for now. So we've still got epoxy in the cup. What I'm going to do now is take my fingers and hit all of the sides with the epoxy, even though it looks like it's been hit with the epoxy. And you can also tell, because you get a color change. You can see the color change in the wood when the epoxy has hit the wood. And you can tell if you have spots. There's a spot right there. You can see where the epoxy flowed around this piece of wood. So, and it hasn't been wet. So. Okay, Stu, you want to come and start again up on the side there. We're going to go around again. You ready?
Yeah.
I can't see because of the cup.
Okay, it's just starting. That's good.
So average it out and empty that cup now on the sides. And you can't tell probably from the camera, but the epoxy is flowing much quicker and easier into the bowl now that it's been coated, and there's no surface tension between the wood and the epoxy anymore. It's just epoxy on epoxy.
Watch that you don't spin the chuck off the spindle there.
Okay, I can go back the other way.
Yeah.
That's how much is left. Okay, let's okay, so can you put this up right now?
Yeah.
I don't want to, my hands are. Yeah. So what I'm doing now is just all the resin is running down the sides of the bowl. Stu, can you straighten that so it's completely level? We got to have that super level now so it doesn't pool to one side. That's pretty good
Pretty
this
good there?
way. Yep. Yep. Good.
Is there enough in there, Steve?
Yeah. Is that the bat phone? So now there's a whole bunch of. Might as well put it all on the top. There's obviously bubbles forming on the epoxy. The beauty about this is I can put my fingers into the bottom of the bowl and put it back on the sides if I see a spot that needs some more. And it just runs back downward. The working time on it is like 20 minutes to half hour, so we're still not to the point where it's gonna stick in one spot. So now we've got lots of bubbles, and basically I just hit it with the torch. Wow, that looks shiny. And if everything works out perfect and this is the only coat we do, then we've got the sides all sealed, and then all the excess epoxy just drains into the bottom and it self-levels, so the bottom is sealed up as well. And then we'll obviously work on the outside a little bit differently, because like now we'd have to have some kind of plastic or something all around the bottom, because when we do the outside it's gonna hit here and then start to drip down straight. And really the only thing I worry about now is little specks of dust and little hairs, you know, like the really fine squiggly hairs. I have pets, and I sometimes do this in my finishing room, which is in my house, so I got pet hair everywhere, so I have to be really careful. I know the cameras aren't going to pick it up, but there's a spot right down kind of in the inside corner that I'm seeing a whole bunch of bubbles come out of. So that tells me that there's some an air inclusion there, that's the air is trying to escape over through the epoxy. So hopefully it's not deep enough and it's just a superficial one. When you hit it with the torch, the bubbles go away, but I can see them coming back already. So, and that's why sometimes these end up being just a seal coat, and then you have to go back and put a flood coat on after you've let this one semi-cure. Stu,
Yep.
I will take, I got too much in the bottom, so I'm going to take this paintbrush. If you can hold that thing up, then what I'm going to do is
Scoop it.
get it. Yeah. I thought I had not enough, but I got too much. You should have got any little projects you needed, any
I actually just thought of that just 2 minutes ago. Gee, I wonder what I could turn and get it ready.
or have something that has a crack in it that you need a little bit of.
Yeah, well, there's that weird bowl there that's got a hole in
Okay.
the side.
Let's. Oh, did you touch the top? Did you touch the top of the rim?
I think I did.
Oh,
Yeah, I guess I did.
okay.
Right
And then I
there.
just need something. I just need something to put this paintbrush down on.
Just put on the paper right there, it's fine. Or on this here. Put it right there.
she's looking mighty pretty. Stu, do you have that little light we've used before, that green one? Yeah. Wow, look at the shine on that, eh?
Yeah.
See the bubbles there, Stu? Right
Yeah.
Down, right down in the corner, they keep popping
Yeah.
up.
The wood looks good.
Yeah, looks awesome. Okay. I'm trying to see if this is flat too, Stu.
It's not.
Okay, can we? I think it's leaned this way.
No, it's actually the other way.
Okay, stop. Yep. And then we'll
See
just
something?
keep
Rotating it?
we'll keep turning it a little bit until it sets,
Till it
and
sets
then it'll just level itself out.
Okay.
Still got bubbles coming up.
That's closer to level than what it was, Steve.
Wow.
I think so.
Check that out. Okay.
Awesome.
And then once we get the epoxy on the outside here, it's really gonna
Explode.
the colors and the metallics in the epoxy will really jump out. Yeah, so this is a Manitoba maple burl. Obviously, there's a lot of red in it, so I was assuming, actually I just assumed everyone knew kind of what it was at the beginning, but there's a lot of eyes and a lot of you know, little bark inclusions and stuff in here, so the air keeps coming out. You can see little surface bubbles popping up. Basically now you have to just keep hitting it with a torch very quickly and over the surface. You don't want to stop the torch in any one spot, because then you'll see smoke, because it's flash curing the epoxy, which you don't want to happen. Yeah. And my intention when I flood coated this was I was going to go back and hit it with maybe 5,000 sandpaper, just to knock a little bit of the gloss off. I'm not really into the super glossy stuff. So, you know, and then if you sand back too much, you could always hit it with a coating of Osmo, and you'll be back to, you know, it won't be that cloudy color. Once you sand, it'll be back to the brilliant color, but not as glossy as what we have now with the actual epoxy. Okay. And one thing I will caution you on, when you do this, you should probably hit it with water before you're finished sanding. That's going to do a couple things. It's going to pop the grain, and then you sand that back. But it's also going to let you know if you have any scratches in your wood. And I see now, because the epoxy is very, very unforgiving in terms of scratches in wood. If you notice, I don't know if you can see it, but the epoxy looks like it never had a scratch in it before, and it was full of scratches and those little indents from the chips. But the wood, there's a couple parts in here where there's sanding marks. And now that the epoxy's on, you can't get them out. So that's a couple reasons why you'd use some water pop it or pop the grain or whatever people call it. And then from now on, it's just hitting it. I still have those bubbles that are kind of popping out of the surface every once in a while, so I'm just going to keep hitting those until it's cured.
I think I see something here. You might want to check.
Don't touch the rim, eh?
No. Yeah, I think it's okay.
What do you see?
There's two little dots right there. Just got to get the right angle to see.
Right there?
Yeah.
See now, and so this is what my experience has been. The epoxy on the sides of the bowl has been there for, roughly 10 minutes now. You can't go back and take off any little spuggies, or you can't go back and add epoxy, because the epoxy won't run the same as that first initial coat. And I have pieces at home, some ashtrays that I tried to wipe off something, and then I paintbrushed a whole bunch more on, and I actually torched it so it would run quicker and run off. But you can still see the outline of where I added that extra epoxy. So you got to know you're kind of in a clean environment, and there's not a lot of dust around, and don't make a lot of dust while this is curing. And this stuff is hard enough after about 4 hours that like just a light dust won't stick. You'll be able to brush it off later after it's cured. This UV epoxy also, their specs on it say you need a full 2 days for full cure. That doesn't mean you can't add layers of epoxy before then, but you can't try and work this, like sand it or turn it or whatever for at least 2 days. Usually I add 1 or 2 days to whatever the specs are for the different epoxy. I think I'm up to 4 different types of epoxy for different applications, so it can get messy in your head sometimes. And when you have a 2-to-1 and you mix a 1-to-1, just ask me what happens. Or you think you're one thing. I mixed an 8-liter bucket of epoxy, and I thought I had the one kind, and I used another kind, and it flash cured on me. So I now have an anchor with a big crack in it. If anyone needs an anchor for their boat or anything, I have one. It's a small Home Depot pail, and it's full of epoxy. That's about $300 worth of epoxy down the drain. Yeah, I see those, Stu. You know what? That may be just sanding it out with like a 4000 or something. Because if it's really like a spuggy and it's prominent, you can feel it.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. You can't go back.
You can't get.
I just did that the other day and it didn't work.
Yeah. Better off to leave it alone.
Yeah. Where's that leg go? What do you want me to sign off now, Bert, or what do you want to do?
Are you done?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we've got another 10 or 15 minutes before the epoxy has set enough that torching it isn't going to do anything. So I'm going to sign off. I imagine when we show this at a meeting, I'll be there. There'll be questions. So, yeah. Hi, everybody. We're back in Stu's shop here. We got, I think the last videos you saw was doing a flood coat on the inside of the bowl. So that ended up being a seal coat, which seals all the pores. We had some bubbles come up right before the epoxy started to cure. So we let it cure, sanded it a bit, back a bit, opened up all the tops of the bubbles. So when you pour out your flood coat, which is the second coat of epoxy, when you pour the flood coat on, you don't see the bubbles. If you take a Dremel with a little bit in it and hit the top to open up the bubbles, then the second coat of epoxy will just flow right into the bottom of the bubble, I guess you'd say. I'm just mixing up so now we're on to the outside of the bowl, and we've taped the inside of the bowl. Here, let me just...
Here, I'll stir that for you, Steve.
Yeah, I got this shit in my hands.
Here's the paper.
I'm going to take these
Okay.
off. So what we've done is we've taped the rim of the bowl. So when we put the inside epoxy on, we epoxied right up to this, basically this corner of the inside of the rim. It slopes in. We've taped to there, and we have this crazy mechanism Stu made. This was the part that was on the workbench when we did the first half, and he's taken it off and put it on this stand. So what we're going to do is we're going to mount it upside down like this, and then we're going to pour kind of on the inside of the bottom here, on kind of the outside edge of the bottom, and it drips all the way down, and then it'll form the drip on this portion of the tape. And then what happens is we just kind of scrape it off as we go, and then when it stops dripping, this whole thing will pull off, and then we'll see what that outside edge looks like. This one it does have some tear out in it. We've sanded it and CA'd part of it, and then sanded back the CA again. But I mean, this could be you could keep doing this to get all of the little tear out pieces done. And Stu said, well, it gives it a little bit of character if you do have a few dimples. So what we did notice on the inside is on a vertical surface, the epoxy will not fill that dimple. It'll go in and then it'll run out the bottom of the dimple. So you're still going to have some not smooth parts. Well, they'll be smooth after the epoxy goes on, but you'll feel an indentation or a dimple in some spots, which I don't know. It's to get it 100% perfect and then get the epoxy on, because this wood was so soft in parts. Very near in the future, there may be another video with us at my shop doing stabilization work, because I have the vacuum chamber that'll fit a bowl this size now. I have the chemical. I have a stove in my shop now that we can use to cure the stabilization polymer, and then I have a vacuum chamber as well. So I kind of got all the pieces put together now, and punky wood potentially is no longer my enemy. So okay, I think that's it for now. I've just reinforced this green tape with the red tuck tape. The good thing about the green tape is it comes off easy, but that's also a bad part because it's starting to peel off itself. So I needed just to stick it down and make sure it stayed on. So, and unfortunately you can't really see the inside of the bowl right now. I think there's some pictures, we have some still pictures we could put in the package, or just wait till it's done and then run a video of inside, outside, and everything. So, all right.
You want to mount that now, Steve?
Yeah, let's mount this, Stu,
Okay.
before I put gloves back on. Oh, it's got to go open a little more. Oh, shit.
Oh, damn it.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna fix that. That's my fault. I shouldn't have touched it. Maybe put another piece of tuck on there.
Yeah.
This time I'll try and leave it alone. You just handle the ball.
I thought I was. You always got to put your hands where they don't belong.
Yeah,
Stu.
right.
And he's useless if he puts his hands in his pockets.
That's right.
Yeah.
Can't do anything.
Luckily, it didn't come off the rim.
Yeah.
A little bit wider. There. Do that
Yeah.
tight. Make sure it doesn't fall out, will you?
Yes, sir. Good. Tight to turn. Okay, now what angle would you like it at?
Okay, we need this angle like that.
On that? Lock her down.
So we're angling it this way, and so what happens is I pour the epoxy on this side of the bowl here. It starts to run, and then Stu is going to turn the bowl as we go.
Do you want me to brush too at the same time?
Well, I'm gonna, for the most part, I'm just gonna use my hand.
Okay.
The brush it will take too long. It's too small.
Okay.
Just if we need somewhere to
Touch up after.
touch up that
Okay.
it doesn't
That's
it
good.
doesn't stick to.
There's
So
a good splash area. We're fine here.
I think so. This is the
Looks
only
good.
thing I'm kind
Don't
of.
worry about it. It doesn't matter if the epoxy goes in there, Steve.
Okay.
I just want to try and keep it off the floor.
So you mixed that good, Stu?
I did, yeah.
No swirlies or anything in it.
No, I just mixed it there for quite a while, so it should be good.
All right.
I don't know, do I want gloves too?
Okay. Slower, slower. Do it on this side, so. So I'm not sure if I talked about it on the inside of the bowl, but I'm using my fingers to move the epoxy around, so we know that all of the parts are coated. The surface tension I've actually had on some of my cigar ashtrays. It coats the whole thing, and then for some reason there's a little spot of wood that's pure wood that's left right in the middle around the epoxy. So we want to make sure that we're getting the epoxy hitting all of the parts, making sure everything looks wet. Okay. throwing it all over the place?
No, it's okay. It's all done on the paper. We're
Okay,
fine.
I can't.
It's a little bit shy there, I think.
Yeah.
A bit more.
Yeah.
Right about there. Start pouring.
Everything's looking good, Bert.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little late to say something now, but as soon as you see all the epoxy hit that kind of dull looking wood, it just goes that brilliant color. Go this way, Steve. Oh, there we go. Now it's-
Got full cover on it now?
Let's just turn it one more time. Make sure. Yeah, seem to. I think we'll just. I'm just gonna zap the rest of this on.
Just spot here.
Where?
Right here. Oh, that's good, Steve. It's a good bubble right there.
Yeah, we'll hit it with the torch here. Wait a second. Keep turning. Keep turning. Okay. Now I think we want to straighten this out now.
Lock it.
Do we need to lock it?
No, I guess not, really. If you want to move it, it's there.
Look at that.
Don't spin it too fast.
She's flowing now.
There's a spot over here that
Oh,
I think needs some
okay.
service.
So right on the edge. Right on the edge, we're missing spots. It hasn't coated some.
I know it's right here, Steve.
Okay, turn either way, Stu. This is, and again, this is the seal coat. So I'm seeing bubbles come out of the wood already on some spots. So it's going to be that this is the first coat, and then we'll need to put another seal coat on it, or a flood coat after this seal coat. If you keep turning it, Stu, I'll
Just torch, yeah.
Wow, this is gonna look good. Holy. Holy shit. Wow. That's crazy looking. Just crazy. Worried about this edge. Just keep turning, just make sure. Okay, we got bubbles there, that's okay. Bubbles there. Make sure we're. Oh yeah, it's just running nice now. It's just
It is, isn't it?
smooth. It's just a few bubbles here and there coming out of the wood.
You may not have to do another coat.
Yeah, if we can get rid of those bubbles as we go along and they don't crop up right at the end like they did last time.
Yeah.
But the epoxy is all covered and it seems to be running really nice. Thank God for this contraption you made. Holy.
Yeah, so that contraption is something that Stu came up with in order to make this easier, so it takes a little preparation to get ready to do this, but once you've got the preparation, it makes it an easier job.
Yeah. There's no use torching those bubbles now. It's so fresh that
Yeah.
we'll just
Yeah.
leave
Let it
it,
sit.
let it sit.
That is it.
And then probably an hour from now we'll torch those bubbles. There's no use keep torching every bubble that comes up while the epoxy is so fresh, because some people say that as you torch you're adding heat to the epoxy and you're expediting or increasing you're making the epoxy cure quicker, and sometimes you can actually create a microfilm on top of the outside of the epoxy that cures and then doesn't let the bubbles release. So you're actually doing the opposite of what you're trying to do, and you may be trapping bubbles in the epoxy. So
What's this? Is that bubbles?
that's a bubble train.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's come out and the bubbles
it's
are
pulling
dripping
down, okay.
dripping down the epoxy.
Okay. Do you want to touch it? Will it do anything?
Wow.
Right there.
See
it?
We won't be able to get that on camera though.
No.
Yeah. See how it just.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
They just
Alright.
pop right out.
Yeah.
But if there's bubbles coming out of there now, they'll keep coming out until.
I see very little, Steve. Another
Yeah.
one here.
Yeah. Just turn it one more time, Stu. And
You just got to get it at the right angle for the reflection of the light on it, and
Yeah.
you can spot them right away.
The other thing about torching is you never take
Hold
your
it on.
torch, hold it somewhere, and turn it on. You always want to turn it on and just swipe. Especially with remember this is UV epoxy, so this is good to a depth of 1/4 of an inch. So this is what you use for flood coating and thin layers, top coats, stuff like that. We're even good on the top. There's nothing. And all those colors, the dark color where the CA was, you can't even tell that the dark color was there with the CA because the epoxy makes all the wood around the parts that had CA on them darken up, so we're good. Wow. Jeez. Look at the red.
I know.
Ugh. Oh.
As long as we don't screw up the bottom when we finish it.
Well, yeah, we're not even done yet.
No, that's right, we're not.
This is going to be $1 million bowl when it's done. Yeah, there's more bubbles coming out of the wood, so
Well, just let
I
it
think
sit.
we'll just let it sit, let it drip. The way we did the bottom is working perfectly. The only thing I'm worried about is potentially having a little bit of a lip when we take the
Take the tape
off.
off. Yeah.
We may have, but
Might be a ridge there.
we can.
But I
sand
think
that-
that'll clean up
we
very
can sand
easily.
that back and
Yeah.
even hit the rim with Osmo. If we sand it back with like a 1,000 or 2,000,
Yeah.
it'll go a bit. It'll go a bit cloudy, but then we could just hit the rim with Osmo and then
And
it'll
it won't even show.
it'll pop back up.
Yeah. Yeah. In your pocket.
Awesome. You got a good picture of that, of the side here, Bert, with all
Yeah.
the colors in it?
Yeah. Roll it all the way around once, and then I'll switch cameras and you roll it all the way around again. Yeah, I'm gonna switch to the other camera now, so you can roll it all the way around again. We get 2 angles. That clear coat epoxy really makes it pop. Oh,
Nice job.
That's working, man. I like my system. I think that worked. Eh?
That is slicker than slick.
We got lucky so far, Steve. It's not over yet, but I think it's going to be fine.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it may be that we get away with 1 coat. I'm not sure.
I think so. Already, what I see, it's looking very good.
Oh, I missed a. I got a dimple there. Oh, we are showing this tomorrow?
Yep.
Huh?
Yep.
Oh! I didn't know that. Yeah, you're right. I should take.
Well, that contraption that we built is this slick. It works very good. Got some on your food?
I'm not sure. Well, there was some on the floor. I'm not sure what I'm tracking.
Walk on this, man. It'll pick up sawdust, and then it won't stick, Steve.
So, we are showing this tomorrow?
yeah.
Oh, okay. I guess I better be there then, eh?
No, you can run and hide.
Yeah. Well, the plan is we'll stitch this one to the video that we took of doing the flood coat on the center. So we already have that one canned and ready. And then tonight, or today when I get home, I'm going to try and edit this down a little bit.
Okay.
And attach it to that one and have it, hopefully have it ready for tomorrow night. So what do you do with the drips that are on the edge there now? Like once they start, like what's the...
Well, what I've done with the cigar ashtrays is I just do this. I just take this,
Oh, yeah.
and then I would just kind of get rid of them,
Yeah.
just to, just so when you peel the tape, you know, they're not going to drip and then go inside.
Okay.
But this has a little bit of time before we want to do that. It's got.
So how long did it take you to learn the timing of this kind of stuff? Because I know you work with several different kinds of epoxy. And how many times did you have things that didn't go the way that you wanted?
How many puddles of epoxy in my garage do I have, you mean, on the floor?
In buckets, boat anchors.
Yeah. Well, we heard about your boat anchor, the previous one, but like for on this process, how many times have you actually done this process to learn? Like how many times did you have to learn it to be able to recognize what you need to do?
So I started to make the cigar ashtrays, and I'll have one tomorrow with me just so we can see it. I've made 8 or 10 cigar ashtrays now. Each one of them, the way they're designed is they're just a square, and then you CNC the cigar ash part of it, the indented part, and then they each one get a flood coat. So that's where I learned that, you know, the guys I follow, typically they do a seal coat and a flood coat, but the first couple I didn't feel like I needed a second coat. So the seal coat really was with the flood coat, but then I did a couple more and I started to get some bubbles, and I started to get some places where, even though I've used my hand and smoothed it out, it gets like a wavy part. And that little wee speck of regular wood, of untouched wood, I took some epoxy and I kind of, you know, spatulaed it on, and it never came out. It never came out properly. So this is why when we do this, we can't touch any of this any longer. It is what it is now, and the way it flows down is the best it's going to get.
So when you're putting your hands to the wood, you do that initially to cover all the places, and then you let it go and let the epoxy surface tension level itself and flow what it wants to do, and then you get what you get.
And that's why after I used my hand on the whole thing, we went and we poured more epoxy around the outside, so that will even out kind of my handprints. And then if you torch right away too, the heat will smooth it out as well.
Okay.
But at this point, the only thing we can do now is torch bubbles. Like there's a bubble there, we'll torch it. But you can't go back and try and fill a little hole or add more epoxy to it now. It shows up as a bump or a hump, and it doesn't drip the same.
Yep.
It doesn't come off with the same as what's on there now. It's the weirdest, craziest thing. It just.
But that's the experience that you end up getting.
Yeah.
So you recognize that. So some of the people that are going to be watching this will probably wonder, you know, well, why are you doing it this way? Well, that just explains it. That you have to do all the preparation, you have to do all the application, and then you have to pour it, and you get what you get. You let it flow, and that's you can't go back and touch it. I guess
from my experience, you can't, because it seems to leave it seems to disfigure the surface.
So if it disfigured the surface bad enough that you were unsatisfied with it, you would sand it back to a surface that's and then do it all over again?
Yeah, you just add and I haven't, like this bowl, there's a little dip in the middle of this bowl, and I was thinking, well, why don't we flood the bottom? But then where does the epoxy stop, and do you now have a
ridge on the
a
outside.
ridge on the inside? So I kind of weighed it, and I looked at the dip in the middle, and I thought, if the guy that's getting this bowl is worried about that little dip in the middle of this bowl, I'm screwed.
Just take the bowl back.
I'm going to take the bowl back.
That'll be your chamber pot then.
I'm still going to charge him, but I'm taking the bowl back. So, you know, I'm a perfectionist. I want to see everything like perfect, but nothing in life is perfect, and this is kind of where we're at with this bowl. And if something isn't 100%, I'm not gonna fiddle with it, because trying to fix that 0.5% that's wrong, you may knock your percentage down to 90% good the second time around. So I'm super happy with the way this coat went on. This thing is absolutely genius for something like this. Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, it is absolutely, like, if you're flooding a bowl like this, you need something like this. It may not be the same, but and when we started this, all three of us, I think, said, let's put it on the lathe. And my brain I couldn't wrap my brain around the fact that
you can't tilt the angle.
You can't tilt it, you can't manipulate it, and now you're set, even on a slow roll. Now that I've done all the ashtrays I've done in this bowl, I know we would have had those
Dip
runs, like you know when you spray paint too much and you get that kind of run. I think we would have had some kind of run or runs in the inside of the bowl.
The centrifugal action would have pushed it to where it wants to go, which may not have been where you needed it to go, if it was on the lathe.
And it keeps turning, but at some point it starts to cure, and
It'll
then,
load up in one spot, and then it'll emphasize, and then
Yeah.
it would look disastrous.
So
So I guess the point there is that spending a little time on planning on how you're gonna hold the bowl in the orientation before you even start mixing epoxy is really important, because you have one shot at it.
yeah.
So it's like a lot of things, preparation is 90% of the work. The actual doing it doesn't take much.
Yeah, so when we started turning this, we had it angled a bit so I could get it,
Right.
I could pour it on the edge and get it to flow down. But then when it sits like this, you have to straighten it out so it's flat, so everything flows. Because if you're still on an angle, you're going to get parts of the epoxy that flow towards the low point, and then potentially, I haven't seen it, but my mind tells me logically that you could get a run that
On an
keeps on the end, because it's on an angle, it wants to run that way. So all the runs that are happening straight
Hopefully
down.
Straight down.
Yeah, see, there's a little bit of a wobble in the side here, but again, that's that part of it that I think you gotta live with, and you gotta look at the beauty of the bowl, and if there's a few things that
Well, they call it character.
yeah.
They are all unique.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't see a lot of this
Yeah.
where the low points where we had those soft marks and the so we may get lucky. I do see a place where there was a bark inclusion that I missed putting CA in, and it's dimpled in.
Dimple? Yeah.
It's dimpled, but it has a seal
Got a
coat
coat on it, so.
of epoxy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, see, there's a couple dimples here.
Yeah, I see that.
But I'm like, don't you dare touch it, Steve.
And I've got my hands in my
And
pockets.
Bert,
You know,
stay back.
yeah. You know better than to touch it.
Well, I didn't know better at one time, but I do now.
Is that live and learn, Bert?
I think that's called live and learn. Yeah. When something is so beautiful, you just have to put your finger on it and find out that the epoxy is
Oh, is that
scratched.
smooth or what? Oh, yes.
Oh, I have to show you pictures of this board. I just did.
Okay.
It is absolutely insane. Well, you know what? Even if we have to do another flood coat on this, it's so easy now.
Piece of cake.
We know what we're
This,
doing.
oh yeah, this has been a great learning experience for us, Steve, and I really think you've nailed it.
So you're just taking the excess off with a
Stick.
A stick.
Yep.
And of course, the stick is riding on top of the paint, so it's not.
Of the tape, yeah.
Yep.
I just don't want to have to pull glob. Like when we pull the tape, basically we're going to leave it in here.
Yeah.
And then in, an hour or two, I'm going to reach my hand into the middle of the bowl and I'm just going to pull
remove the tape.
I'm going to put my fingers in as close to the side of the bowl I can, and then just pull down, and that painter's tape should just come right off. And Stu, I'll probably get you to turn it, and I'll just keep pulling the tape down, and that should do it. And none of the drips or anything had a chance to run in. It was all right on the corner of the tape. So that's the other way we know it's kind of level and flat.
Well, that's good. So Steve, so now that basically what we're doing now is we're just waiting for epoxy to dry.
Yep. And torching, if the bubbles come up again, it's we're not sure whether we're going to need a flood coat, another coat until
it dries.
Later on in the process, and see if we have any bubbles that are left. I imagine we will have to do another one. My brain, I can't see how the bubbles will stop if the bubble is here on the side and the epoxy is flowing this way. I'm not sure if the epoxy is gonna get into the hole to seal it up, or we need another flood coat.
I see two.
Yeah, there's two here.
Yeah.
There's a little bit
Does that
left.
help?
There's a little bit left. Do you want to mix more for your bowl?
Yeah. Not right now. We won't worry about it. Concentrate on this.
Oh
Does that
yeah.
help?
Does that help camera, Bert? Or does it wash it out?
It washes out, but go ahead. What you're doing is more important. I'll switch to the other camera. We can't quite see. That's not bad.
Yeah, there's that crack there. Look at that. Shiny. Same place. I just turned it all the way around and came back, and there was more bubbles. So
That tells you it's going to probably have a permanent.
yeah, see, there's still bark.
Yeah.
That bark there, Bert.
Yeah. So swing it to the other camera because this is washed out with the light.
Turn the light
There, yeah, there you go. So in that bark line that you can see, that's what you're talking about?
Yeah, the bark is typically a little bit more porous, and it's got more air holes, right? Because just the way the bark forms. So we're getting a lot of times you get air coming out of those bark holes. And when I'm prepping the wood, I pull out and Dremel all the bark that I see, but I mean this
Well, you can't get them all.
that piece of bark was embedded inside the middle of the wood, so I think he's gonna crap his pants when he sees this thing.
Oh, I'm sure you will. Everybody will.
Yeah, same spot
Yeah.
on here.
The two of
So I'm not gonna
Might as well leave it for now.
leave it for a while, and then if you keep hitting it, it's not doing it any good. Crazy. Okay. Anything else, Bert?
Let's pull the light away so it doesn't wash it out.
Just push the button.
Okay, so we'll do a little finale and I'll shut the recording off.
Push it straight up. That's it.
Okay, well, we won't know if it needs another coat or not until an hour and a half, 2 hours from now. This epoxy, again, I probably said it before, but it has a working time of 20 minutes to half hour to 40 minutes, depending on the temperature of your shop. I warmed up this epoxy in a bath, a hot water bath before, just to make sure because it's pretty thick. And when you're putting it on a horizontal surface, you know, you almost use like a tile trowel or something to create those ridges, and then they flow back together, and that's how you get it really smooth. But in this instance, we can't do that. We just put it on the edges and let it flow. So I put it in the water to make sure that it was a little bit more liquid and it flowed more consistently. So that's it for now. And once we get it all done, we'll take some awesome pictures and send them out to everybody or put them on the website. And I'm sure there'll be a few questions on all this process from people. So
Great, well thanks a bunch, Steve. This has been a learning experience for me too. This is great.
okay, thanks guys.